Part 2, Our Corrupt Government is Gang Stalking Mobbing Citizens, My Story. I left off Part 1 by saying I had been in touch with the Orange County District Attorney before. When I called the DA to find out what I could do about my mobbing, organized gang stalking, I was told by an investigator, police, unions, corporations did gang stalking, mobbing. When I began to send pictures I was taking to the district attorney, his response was to send mobile mental health to my house. By taking pictures, the person from mobile mental health explained, I was endangering myself. Endangering myself could be a cause for institutionalization. I went to a lawyer. What they are doing, the lawyer told me, is a form of harassment. Do you have $15,000, he asked me. That's how much we would need for a private investigator. I didn't have $15,000. So I started to write to everyone I could think of, the governor, the legislature, the state branch of the ACLU. I wrote to everyone, even pastors, to tell them what was going on in their community. Nothing helped. One aide in a legislator's office asked me if I had legislation he could sponsor. I didn't. I was alone in fighting this. Moving to California. I always wanted to move to California, and I asked myself, could it be going on there too? I decided I was going to move. The challenge was how to get my profoundly mentally handicapped brother to California without getting thrown off a plane because of his behavior. I decided to go by car, and I paid a distant cousin to drive us there. That's when I learned this wasn't confined to New York. I would come out of my motel room in Oklahoma, and there in the parking lot, empty of people, would be a person in red coming down the stairs. I would come out of a general store in Texas, and a red truck would pass in front of me. The patterns I saw in New York, I was seeing again, but not everywhere, not in the Plain States. I would later read on the ACLU's website that surveillance by police was going on in over 30 states. They also said methods were being used our forefathers had never dreamed of. I wondered if there were some governors who kept this out of their states. Later, I would read online about gang stalking by firemen going on in Florida. I would read online of a news story of a financial advisor passing out leaflets in New Jersey to inform the community about his gang stalking, and I would exchange emails with him. I saw a YouTube video about a couple in Ohio who was interviewed by the news and was being gang stalked after having a dispute with a fire chief over buying a house. When I was in California, I got an offer from a lawyer in Missouri to pay me for telling her how I coped with gang stalking to help a client of hers who was being gang stalked. So it wasn't long before I understood this was a national phenomenon. My gang stalking in California began almost immediately. I stayed first in a motel by the ocean. I would go to the laundry room, and a person in red would be coming out of their unit. I moved from there into a place I rented with the intention of buying with a very strong neighborhood watch group. I would rarely see anyone passing by my unit, but when I would come out of my unit, a neighbor would pass by. In gang stalking, this tactic is called same-time exit entry. This was the pattern that took place in my neighborhood in New York. I would come out of my house, a neighbor wearing red would come out of theirs. There was gang stalking at intersections with red trucks, cars. I would take a walk, and the only other person walking would be a person in red. I decided to buy a nearby new mobile home. I would go to dump my garbage in the dumpster, and someone in red would come after me. As I exited the park I lived in, a person in red would be standing outside their house, or a red car would be coming toward me in the opposite lane. I sold the mobile home and moved where I live now. In every neighborhood I have lived in, since the conflict with the firemen in New York, I have been gang stalked by my neighbors. In the 9 years that my government gang stalking has gone on, I have never been able to have a neighbor friend. I believe they get surrounding neighbors to gang stalk their targets on their entries and exits to isolate their gang stalking targets. One experience I've had repeatedly is I hire a handyman or a blue-collar service worker, and next I see them on the street as I exit my development wearing red or in the color the gang stalkers are wearing. It's as if they want to cut gang stalking targets off from any help to isolate them as completely as possible. Trying to expose government gang stalking in California. What do? You're in a state where you don't know anyone and you are being gang stalked 24/7 by police, by firemen, by security guards, by your neighbors, by people wearing or carrying red and driving red cars and trucks. I tried to inform people of what was going on. My routine was to get up in the morning, clean the house, iron, and after breakfast or lunch, take my brother out walking in the community for exercise. Every day we walked in a different neighborhood. In California, I'm gang stalked in every neighborhood I walk in. From the very beginning, I decided this could not be tolerated. In New York, when my neighbors were gang stalking me, I put signs in my windows to inform the community what was going on. When I came to California, I would walk through the streets carrying a sign explaining I was being gang stalked. I put a car topper on my car explaining gang stalking to the public. I put magnetic stickers on my car describing it too. I passed out leaflets and I continued to write to every public official I could think of about what was going on. Early on, where this all started in Newburgh, New York, when I was experiencing acts of vandalism, I learned a camera could help. Especially when no one believes you, taking pictures, video can provide proof of what is going on. But for me, it is also something more. When you are gang stalked by 40 to 100 people a day, everywhere you go, and no one you write to, no public official will help, you get angry. I would come home from being gang stalked all day, and the first thing I would do is post video or snapshots of my experience on Facebook and YouTube. That's the most effective way I have found to cope with gang stalking, with the anger you feel about having to go through this every day. I started a website about government gang stalking. My first website was called The Introvert Speaks, which morphed into No Stasi in America, which became Stop Gang Stalking Please, the website I have now. I began informing myself, reading the ACLU website, following closely the comments of Bob Barr, who criticized fusion centers. I read the Bill of Rights Defense Committee website, the Electronic Frontier Committee website. I read what politicians like Senator Russ Feingold, who constantly raised civil liberties issues, were saying. I put the insights I gained early into a book I self-published, Organized Gang Stalking, New Torture Tactic to Neutralize Citizens. From Senator Russ Feingold, when he was still in office, and the ACLU, I got insights into how government gang stalking probably started. The Attorney General under George Bush, Michael Mukasey, changed the guidelines for the FBI, which had been put in place after COINTELPRO, to prevent those kinds of abuses of citizens' civil liberties from ever happening again. What he did was effectively to suspend anti-COINTELPRO regulations. That was what the Bush administration, with Dick Cheney president, did. Senator Kennedy, Russ Feingold, sent Mukasey a letter about their deep concerns about what he was doing. We are concerned, they wrote, about the extent to which such authority might, for example, permit the FBI to conduct long-term physical surveillance of an innocent American citizen, interview such an individual's neighbors and professional colleagues, including based on pretext or misrepresentation, recruit human sources to provide information on that individual, or conduct commercial database searches on that individual, all without any basis for suspicion. Moreover, the mechanisms that the FBI intends to use for approval and oversight of these new investigative tools have not been shared with Congress, and yet are critical to understanding how these tools could be employed. We are particularly concerned, said Senator Kennedy and Feingold, that the draft guidelines might permit an innocent American to be subjected to such intrusive surveillance based in part on race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, or on protected First Amendment activities. Their letter continued, the draft guidelines include broad information sharing provisions with few constraints. While there is no doubt that our intelligence agencies must share important threat information with one another, we have serious questions about the scope of information sharing as it relates to U.S. persons who are under no suspicion of wrongdoing. The ACLU wrote, "We're also working for change in FBI investigative guidelines that represent a serious threat to the privacy rights of innocent Americans. The original Attorney General guidelines were adopted in the mid-1970s to limit the FBI's investigative authority after it was discovered that the agency engaged in widespread abuses and violations of constitutional rights, including politically motivated spying on figures like Dr. Martin Luther King. In COINTELPRO, many ordinary citizens were targeted too." The ACLU went on, "In 2008, then Attorney General Michael Mukasey issued much broader guidelines that allowed FBI agents to use paid informants, monitor a person's activities, or engage in other types of intrusive surveillance without probable cause or any evidence of wrongdoing. One particularly bizarre provision allows the FBI to violate the Attorney General guidelines without approval from or notice to the Attorney General." The ACLU continued, "It is hard to overestimate the dangers to personal privacy inherent in creating an ambiguous set of guidelines for invasive surveillance of Americans and then granting the FBI the authority to violate those guidelines unilaterally." Something similar to government gang stalking went on during World War I, called the American Protective League, a voluntary auxiliary of 250,000 citizen members who worked with the approval of the Justice Department and were involved in the surveillance and harassment of citizens. Attorney General Palmer stopped the program, saying it was based on rumor and hearsay. Lieutenant Colonel Anthony Schaefer confirmed something I was thinking when he told Judge Napolitano on his show Freedom Watch our government was using neurolinguistic programming in its PsyCops program. Anchoring is a technique of neurolinguistics programming. I know that because in thinking about doing coaching after I retired from teaching, I spent $2,000 on a self-teaching kit in neurolinguistic programming, which is widely used in coaching. Anchoring has been defined as the tendency of any one element of an experience to bring back the entire experience. In government gang stalking, RED, the most frequently used anchor for 9 years, becomes associated with the experience of being surveilled and harassed by the gang stalkers. The anchor RED reminds the target of the whole aversive experience, triggering a negative emotional state. The goal of the FBI's COINTELPRO program was to neutralize their targets. What they are doing in government gang stalking is the same thing. The health effects of mobbing have been documented by researchers. There is a long list of consequences that Dr. Pamela Lutkin-Sandvik of the University of New Mexico and Sarah J. Tracy and Jess Kate Alberts of Arizona State University in their study tell us can result from bullying mobbing. Permanent psychological and occupational impairment, damage to self-esteem, damage to physical health, cognitive functioning, and emotional health. It can increase the risk of depression, cause prolonged duress disorder, alcohol abuse, post-traumatic stress disorder, and suicide. Chronic stress, high blood pressure, and increased risk for coronary heart disease can also result from bullying mobbing. The exact kind of consequences you'd want to achieve to neutralize someone. We have a definition of gang stalking. The definition given to a female reporter for the Central Coast News by law enforcement was, gang stalking is when multiple people organize to systematically stalk and harass a person, whether emotionally or physically. We know who is doing government gang stalking: police, firemen, security guards, EMS, ambulance drivers, both public and private, citizens, most likely from the National Neighborhood Watch Group program, which is part of Citizen Corps. We know the tactics they are using: sleep deprivation. They have gang stalking neighbors use power equipment, beeping, barking dogs, hammering to disturb sleep. Social isolation, getting surrounding neighbors to gang stalk, getting members of the community to gang stalk. Conspicuous surveillance. Using an American Stasi, most likely neighborhood watch group Citizen Corps members to gang stalk using red cars, red trucks, wearing or carrying or pushing red strollers or wearing or riding red bikes. At least that's what it was in the beginning. Unremitting harassment. Beeping horns when you try to sit in your yard or collect your mail. Using anchors, for instance, porch lights flickering on and off when you go out of your house at night. Same time exit entry gang stalking. Having gang stalkers pass your house on foot or by car when you leave or enter your home. Having gang stalkers there on your exits and entries in the community. Noise. They use power equipment, hammering in their program of unremitting harassment throughout the day. Intimidation with dogs. As you walk in the park, they let dogs off their leashes. This goes on wherever you walk. They even have dogs jumping out of car windows in store malls. Anonymity is what keeps government gang stalking going. So many people do it that you can't hold them individually responsible. But when you take video of your gang stalking, as I did, and publish those videos and snapshots of what you are experiencing on Facebook and YouTube, the anonymity starts to fall away. The whole community starts to look at people with red cars and red trucks and wonders, are they gang stalkers? For the 9 years of my gang stalking, that didn't seem to cause problems for the gang stalking U.S. government. But when views on my YouTube channel reached over 200,000, that might have caused the U.S. government to shift gears. On May 29, 2015, after 9 years of being gang stalked with the anchor red, they switched the primary anchor. I began to be gang stalked intermittently using the anchor red, but primarily by people wearing black pants or black shorts or black caps, driving black cars and black trucks, pushing black strollers, riding black bikes. And in July, a third anchor replaced the blank anchor as the primary anchor in my government gang stalking. Today, the primary anchor used in my gang stalking is white, and black being used quite a bit, and red used a little less than black. I'm wondering if there might be a fourth anchor color, or fifth or sixth, to restore more of the anonymity that makes gang stalking work. How do you survive this? Anger is the primary emotion I feel as a gang stalking target. The best way I have found to deal with my anger is to expose what the government gang stalkers are doing by sitting down and posting what I see on Facebook and YouTube to try to end this horrendous, illegal program. I have also a number of resources that I can use when I'm stressed out. I have something called the Stress Eraser, which is like a biofeedback device. You can get more information about this at stresseraser.com. I use acupressure at times from a book, Acupressure for Emotional Healing by Michael Gatch and Beth Ann Henning. I've used ideas from The Healing Power of Art by Barbara Ganem from Sounds True. The books I read in psychoanalysis and psychology over a number of years have helped me a lot. The relaxation CD in the Self-Hypnosis Home Study course by Stephen Gurkovich, who worked with Andrew Weil, is one of my favorite ways to relax. For those who need professional help, I'd recommend going to the EMDR International Association website to find a therapist. EMDR is helpful for those suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder or trauma. To deal with noise, I have white noise machines throughout my house, which I use for restful sleep. Government gang stalking is not easy to express in words. Words don't begin to describe how stressful this experience is. But what they might do is make us ask, is what is going on constitutional? We've seen abuses like this before in COINTELPRO. And it was when the anti-COINTELPRO regulations were rescinded in the Bush administration that the door was opened for what we are seeing today. We need an investigation into government gang stalking. Let's hope that 2016 will be the year when the horrendous psychops program that the U.S. government is using against its own people, government gang stalking, is finally exposed to the American public.